Their favourite weapons were a pair of short swords, one in each hand. Before seizing another ship, they sprinkled their cheekbones and bodies with an infusion of garlic water, which they considered a certain charm against shot. Each crewman travelled with his wife, but the captain sailed with a harem, which was 5 or 6 in number, and which in victory was always replenished. Somewhere around the middle of 1809, there was made public an imperial decree, of which I transcribe Somewhere around the middle of 1809, there was made public an imperial decree, of which I transcribe the first and last parts. Its style was widely criticized. It ran, "Men who are cursed and evil, men capable of profaning bread, men who pay no heed to the clamour of the tax collector or the orphan, men in whose undergarments are stitched the phoenix and the dragon, men who deny the great truths of printed books, men who allow their tears to run towards the north. All these are disrupting the commerce of our rivers and the age-old intimacy of our seas. In unsound, unseaworthy craft, they are tossed by storms both day and night. Nor is their object one of benevolence. They are not, and never were, the true friends of the seafarer. Far from lending him their aid, they swoop down on him most viciously, inviting him to rack and ruin, inviting him to death. In such wise do they violate the natural laws of the universe, that rivers overflow their banks, vast acreages are drowned, sons are pitted against fathers, and even the roots of rain and drought are altered. In consequence, Admiral Quolang, I give to your hand the administration of punishment. Never forget that clemency is a prerogative of the throne, and that it would be presumptuous of a subject to endeavour to assume such a privilege. Therefore, be merciless, be impartial, be obeyed, be victorious. The incidental reference to unseaworthy vessels was of course false. Its aim was to encourage Quolang's expedition. Some 90 days later, the forces of the widow Ching came face to face with those of the Middle Kingdom. Nearly 1,000 ships joined in battle, fighting from early morning until late evening. A mixed chorus of bells, drums, curses, gongs, and prophecies, along with the report of great ordnance, accompanied the action. The Emperor's forces were sundered. Neither the prescribed clemency nor the recommended cruelty had occasion to be exercised. Quolang observed a rite that our present-day military in defeat choose to ignore: suicide. The proud widow's 600 war junks and 40,000 victorious pirates then sailed up the mouths of the Sikiang, and to port and starboard they multiplied fires and loathsome revels and orphans. Entire villages were burned to the ground. In one of them alone the number of prisoners passed 1,000. 120 women who sought the confused refuge of neighbouring reed fields and paddies were given away by a crying baby, and later sold into slavery in Macau. Although at some remove, the tears and bereavement wreaked by this depredation came to the attention of Ching, the son of heaven. Certain historians contend that this outcry pained him less than the disaster that befell his punitive exposition. The truth is that he organized a second exposition, awesome in banners, in sailors and soldiers, in the engines of war, in provisions, in augurs, in astrologers. The command this time fell upon one Ting Kui. The fearful multitude of ships sailed across into the delta of the Sikiang, closing off passage to the pirate squadron. The widow fitted out for battle. She knew it would be difficult, even desperate. Night after night, and month after month of plundering and idleness had weakened her men. The opening of battle was delayed. Lazily, the sun rose and set upon the rippling reeds. Men and their weapons were waiting. Noons were heavy, afternoons endless. And yet each evening, high, shiftless flocks of airy dragons rose from the ships of the imperial squadron and came gently to rest on the enemy decks and surrounding waters. They were lightweight constructions of rice paper and strips of reed, akin to comets, and their silvery or reddish sides repeated identical characters. The widow anxiously studied this regular stream of meteors and read in them the long and perplexing fable of a dragon which had always given protection to a fox, despite the fox's long ingratitude and repeated transgressions. The moon grew slender in the sky, and each evening the paper and reed figures brought the same story, with almost imperceptible variance. The widow was distressed, and she sank deep into thought. When the moon was full in the sky, and in the reddish water, the story seemed to reach its end. Nobody was able to predict whether limitless pardon or limitless punishment would descend upon the fox. But the inexorable end drew near. The widow came to an understanding. She threw her 2 short swords into the river, kneeled in the bottom of a small boat, and ordered herself rowed to the imperial flagship. It was dark. The sky was filled with dragons, this time yellow ones. On climbing aboard, the widow murmured a brief sentence. "The fox seeks the dragon's wing," she said. It is a matter of history that the fox received her pardon and devoted her lingering years to the opium trade. She also left off being the widow, assuming a name which in English means luster of instruction. From this period, wrote one Chinese chronicler lyrically, ships began to pass and repass in tranquility. All became quiet on the rivers and tranquil on the four seas. Men sold their weapons and bought oxen to plough their fields. They buried sacrifices, said prayers on the tops of hills, and rejoiced themselves by singing behind screens during the daytime.